I'm Clara Nightwell, and I'm here with Rowan Hartsteele. Tonight we're talking about one of the most extraordinary minds in modern history.
Marie Curie changed the way humanity understands matter itself. Her discoveries transformed science, medicine, and the future of knowledge.
A woman working in a world that rarely made space for her.
She pursued truth with extraordinary discipline, often at great personal cost. And one detail about her life often surprises people. Marie Curie's house still stands today. If you stay with us until the end of this broadcast, we'll tell you what became of that house up to this very day.
Rowan, before Marie Curie became a symbol of science, who was she as a young woman?
Before the world knew her as Marie Curie, she was Maria Skłodowska, born in Warsaw in 1867, in a Poland that did not officially exist. Her country was under Russian control, and education itself was an act of resistance. From an early age, Maria grew up surrounded by knowledge. Both of her parents were educators, yet political oppression limited what could be taught openly. Books were censored, ideas were monitored, curiosity in itself carried risk. Tragedy entered her life early. The loss of her mother and one of her sisters shaped her character profoundly. Rather than turning away from study, Maria turned toward it, as if knowledge could offer structure in a world defined by uncertainty. Because women were barred from formal universities, Maria joined underground educational circles known as the Flying University. Classes were held in secrecy, constantly changing locations to avoid detection by authorities. There she absorbed mathematics, physics, and philosophy, not for recognition, but for understanding.
So learning itself was already an act of courage.
Exactly. And when the opportunity finally came to study abroad, Maria made a difficult choice. She worked for years as a governess, sending money to support her sister's education in Paris with the promise that one day the roles would be reversed. It was patience, discipline, and belief in a future she could not yet see. By the time she boarded a train to France, she carried very little with her, except determination.
Rowan, what awaited Maria when she arrived in Paris?
Paris was everything Maria had imagined, and far more difficult than she expected. She arrived alone, with little money, limited French, and an unshakable determination to study. She enrolled at the Sorbonne under the name Marie, immersing herself in physics and mathematics. Her days were consumed by lectures, her nights by study. Often she survived on little more than bread and tea. Cold winters passed in unheated rooms. Hunger became familiar. Yet Marie refused comfort if it meant distraction. She was not chasing recognition. She was chasing understanding, a deeper grasp of the invisible forces shaping matter. Her brilliance soon became evident. Professors noticed her precision and discipline. Among them was Pierre Curie, a quiet physicist known for his integrity and unconventional thinking. Their connection was intellectual before it was personal. They spoke the same language of curiosity.
So their partnership began with ideas.
Yes. What united them was respect. They shared a belief that science was not a path to prestige, but a responsibility. Together, they began studying mysterious emissions from uranium, phenomena that did not yet have a name. It was the beginning of a discovery that would change the world, and quietly begin to change her body as well.
Rowan, at this point in her life, what exactly was Marie Curie beginning to study?
At the turn of the century, science believed it had nearly finished understanding matter. Atoms were considered stable, predictable, and complete. But Marie Curie sensed something was missing. While studying uranium salts, she noticed a strange phenomenon. They emitted energy continuously, without any apparent external source. The radiation did not weaken. It did not stop. This observation challenged everything physics believed at the time. If matter could release energy on its own, then atoms were not indivisible. They contained internal forces science had never seen. Marie named this phenomenon radioactivity, giving language to something invisible. Working in a makeshift laboratory, little more than a converted shed, Marie and Pierre processed tons of pitchblende by hand. They stirred boiling materials for hours, inhaling vapors they did not yet understand, often leaving the laboratory glowing faintly in the dark.
They had no idea how dangerous it was.
None at all. To them, the glowing samples were beautiful, almost magical. Marie kept test tubes in her pockets. Pierre carried them home. Pain, burns, and fatigue were dismissed as exhaustion. Science had no vocabulary yet for radiation sickness. In searching for truth, they were unknowingly absorbing it into their own bodies.
Rowan, when their discoveries became known, How did the world respond to what Marie Curie had found?
At first, the scientific community struggled to understand what Marie Curie had uncovered. Radioactivity defied existing theories, forcing physicists to reconsider the structure of matter itself. But as her findings were confirmed, recognition followed, slowly at first, then suddenly. In 1903, Marie and Pierre Curie were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, along with Henri Becquerel. Marie became the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize. Yet even then, recognition came with hesitation. Many institutions were reluctant to fully acknowledge her contribution simply because she was a woman. Despite growing fame, Marie rejected luxury and patents. She believed scientific knowledge belonged to humanity, not to individuals. She refused to profit from her discoveries, a decision that would later leave her financially vulnerable.
She chose openness over protection.
Yes, and while the world celebrated the glow of discovery, the consequences began quietly. Burns appeared on her hands. Chronic fatigue followed. No alarms sounded. No warnings existed. The danger remained invisible. What brought her fame was already shaping her fate.
Rowan, after recognition and discovery, what happened next in Marie Curie's life?
Just as the world began to recognize her brilliance, Marie Curie faced devastating loss. In 1906, Pierre Curie was killed in a sudden accident, struck by a horse-drawn carriage on a rainy Paris street. In a single moment, Marie lost not only her husband, but her intellectual companion, the one person who fully shared her work, her language, her solitude. Grief overwhelmed her. Letters from that period reveal profound sorrow and isolation. Yet even in mourning, responsibility pressed forward. Marie accepted Pierre's former position at the Sorbonne, becoming the first woman to ever teach there. She returned to the laboratory alone. The silence was unbearable. Every instrument, every notebook, every experiment carried his absence. But Marie continued, not from ambition, but from devotion to the work they had begun together.
So science became a way to survive.
Yes. Knowledge became structure in grief. She poured herself deeper into research, unaware that prolonged exposure was quietly weakening her body. Headaches, exhaustion, and pain became constant companions, accepted as the cost of purpose. She carried loss in silence, and discovery in her hands.
Rowan, after all she had endured, did the world finally treat Marie Curie with fairness?
Sadly, no. As Marie Curie became more visible, admiration slowly turned into scrutiny. Her private life became public territory. At a time when women were expected to remain invisible, Marie stood alone, brilliant, foreign, widowed, and independent. When personal letters were leaked and rumors spread, newspapers attacked her character rather than her work. She was judged not as a scientist, but as a woman who refused to conform. The same society that praised her discoveries questioned her morality.
That must have been devastating.
It was isolating. Marie faced hostility not only from the press, but from institutions that once welcomed her. Invitations disappeared. Respect wavered, yet she refused to respond publicly. She chose silence over defense, letting her work speak where words could not. In the midst of scandal, she received a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry. Even then, she was advised not to attend the ceremony. She went anyway. Her presence was quiet defiance, dignity without apology.
Rowan, when the world was pulled into war, did Marie Curie step away from science or deeper into it?
When the First World War erupted, Marie Curie did not retreat into laboratories or institutions. She stepped directly into the chaos. France was overwhelmed. Thousands of wounded soldiers arrived at hospitals every day, many dying simply because surgeons could not see where bullets and shrapnel were lodged. Marie immediately understood that radiation, the very force she had spent her life studying, could save lives. She organized mobile X-ray units, later known as the Little Curies. These vehicles brought imaging technology directly to the front lines. She personally trained nurses and doctors, often driving the vehicles herself through dangerous terrain. She worked long hours under constant exposure, without protection, without rest. For Marie Curie, science was no longer discovery. It was service.
She was saving lives with the same force that was harming her.
Yes. Thousands of soldiers survived because of her work. Yet each hour of exposure deepened the invisible damage within her body. She never complained. She never spoke of sacrifice. To her, helping was simply the correct use of knowledge. In the midst of destruction, Marie Curie turned science into compassion.
Rowan, after the war, what condition was Marie Curie left in?
When the war ended, Marie Curie did not return as a hero. She returned exhausted. Her body carried years of exposure, from laboratories, from hospitals, from the front lines. At the time, radiation was still poorly understood. There were no protections, no limits, no warnings. What had once seemed miraculous now lived quietly inside her. She suffered from chronic fatigue, persistent pain, and weakening vision. Simple tasks became difficult, yet she refused to abandon her work. Marie continued teaching, mentoring young scientists, and leading research institutions, even as her strength diminished. Friends noticed the change. The woman who once worked endlessly now moved carefully, deliberately. Still, she rarely spoke of illness. For Marie Curie, suffering was not something to display, it was something to endure quietly.
So even then, she kept going.
She believed that knowledge carried responsibility until the very end. She had given the world tools that would transform medicine and science, and she accepted that the cost had become personal. There was no bitterness, no regret recorded, only persistence. Her body weakened, but her purpose never did.
Rowan, how did Marie Curie's life come to an end?
Marie Curie died in 1934, not in a laboratory explosion or dramatic accident, but quietly, from aplastic anemia, a disease now understood to be caused by prolonged exposure to radiation. At the time, the connection was only partially known. What had once been invisible finally revealed its cost. She was 66 years old. Her body had carried decades of exposure without protection, from early experiments, from glowing samples, from wartime medical work. The same force that transformed medicine had slowly transformed her blood. News of her death spread through scientific communities worldwide. There was grief, but also reverence. Marie Curie was no longer only a scientist. She had become a symbol of devotion to knowledge.
It feels like the world lost more than a brilliant mind.
It lost an example. Marie Curie showed that discovery is not merely intellect. It is endurance, responsibility, and sometimes sacrifice. She never sought fame. She never sought comfort. She sought truth, and followed it to the very end. When she was laid to rest, the world honored her achievements. But it would take many years to fully understand what she had given, and what it had cost.
Before we close tonight, I'd like to bring Margaret into the conversation. Margaret, for those who want to understand Marie Curie beyond the name, where would you suggest they begin?
A beautiful place to start is Madame Curie, a biography by Eve Curie. It's written by her daughter, and it offers something rare. A portrait of Marie not as an icon, but as a mother, a woman, and a person shaped by loss and perseverance.
So it's more intimate than scientific.
Exactly. It helps readers feel her humanity before they admire her achievements.
And for someone interested in the broader impact of her discoveries.
Radioactive, Marie and Pierre Curie. A Tale of Love and Fallout by Lauren Redness explores that beautifully. It blends science, art, and history, showing how her work echoed far beyond the laboratory and into culture itself.
That feels like a different way of understanding legacy.
It is. It shows how discovery continues to shape the world long after the discoverer is gone.
And if someone wants to understand the inner world behind that dedication?
Chapter Obsessive Genius. The Inner World of Marie Curie by Barbara Goldsmith explores her discipline, her isolation, and the psychological cost of lifelong devotion to knowledge.
3 very different perspectives, the woman, the impact, and the mind behind it all.
Together, they help us understand not only what she discovered, but who she was.
Thank you, Margaret. That was beautifully explained, as always.
Thank you, Clara. It was a pleasure.
Rowan, at the beginning of tonight, you mentioned that Marie Curie's house still stands today.
Yes, and it remains one of the most complex parts of her legacy. Marie Curie's house and laboratory are still standing. They exist physically, but they exist in uncertainty. For years, there have been discussions about turning the house into a museum, but the levels of radiation that remain inside make this impossible. The objects, the furniture, the notebooks, they still emit traces of the work she once carried in her hands. At the same time, the idea of demolishing the house feels unthinkable. To many, it would be a sacrilege, the erasure of a place where history was written. So it remains suspended between preservation and danger. It stands as a quiet reminder that knowledge leaves marks, not only on the world, but on the places where it was born.
Thank you, Rowan. And thank you for staying with us tonight. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if these stories resonate with you, stay with us. There's always more waiting for you here.